You're listening to a Cult Talk Network podcast.
File access granted.
Hello, all you believers, idealists, skeptics, and all those questioning the universe around them. My name is Bailey.
And I'm Ty.
And welcome to today's Cult Talks Conspiracy. I'm very excited for today's conspiracy.
It's another big one.
It's another big one. We had some, and you're never going to believe what came up again during our research. I'll save it. I'll save it. But we do have a reoccurring, destination that's coming back up. So I'm excited because we just talked about it on the last one. How?
Oh, nice.
This place has come up multiple times, but I don't want to get too much away yet. But yeah, we're doing Operation Paperclip today. I am very excited because I actually used to think that Operation Paperclip was the same as Operation Blue Book. So doing our last podcast, so in real time, we actually did it yesterday. So I'm trying not to say like in yesterday's recording, but in our last podcast, we really dove deep into Blue Book. That was cool. So I'm really excited to dive into the other side of this. We're again going back to the Cold War era. We're going to be talking a lot about how the Cold War started, doing a little bit of history in there, and I love it when history mingles with conspiracy. And it just flows so effortlessly together. It's like, what are you guys doing to us? I'm excited. What about you?
Oh, I'm very excited. This is a good one. Operation Paperclip, it was definitely on my list to hit at some point. You beat me to it, so Operation Paperclip is super interesting. I wonder if many people know much about it, because it is kind of a deep cut if you're not in the know. If you're not in the conspiracy know, it's something that you might not be privy to, but it's pretty shocking, to say the least, of what actually transpired in Operation Paperclip. It's really crazy. It's just a really crazy operation that they enacted, but it makes sense. Is the crazy thing.
It does, and it brings a lot of things into question, especially with us being humans, and we worry about morals and ethics. And this specific thing was really a question of it. Later on, it became a big question of morals. But what really interested me and what really got me hooked on this one was how much it had to do with the creation of NASA in our modern day space program.
Oh yeah,
I mean, there are some huge key players in there, and I mean, it's crazy to think that. We got to get into it. I'm going to get too much.
We talk a little bit about it in File 001, actually.
Yeah.
If I recall, I think we do touch on it very briefly.
We do.
Because it is in that time period. But this is a good one. But there's something in the air. Do you feel it? Do you know what it is?
No.
Something feel like Christmas. This is one of the. And we're deep in December here when this episode's coming out.
Deep in December.
We're getting ready for Christmas. I think this comes out like 2 weeks before Christmas, if I recall.
Unless it's spooky season, there's nothing in the air for me.
I'm a big Christmas guy. I fucking love Christmas, but that's why I push so hard for a Cult Talk Christmas. That's like my favorite. That's like my second favorite thing next to Cultober. Is a very Cult Talk Net Christmas, which we do have something we'll announce into this episode. We will announce our special gift for our fans that's going to be coming out on that week. So we'll announce that at the end, but. We do have something coming for you guys, part of a very Cult Talk Net Christmas too.
That one's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait. My mom was always the one that was super into Christmas. And then I took after my dad with Halloween. So my siblings are all into Christmas. And then I'm just like the black sheep over in the corner. Like, when is October coming back?
I go right from Christmas. Right from Halloween to Christmas.
I know. The very next day, your tree was up.
Yeah. There's very little time. I'm ready for it when it hits.
I still have like skeletons all over my house.
I have. I repurposed a couple of my Halloween decorations to be Christmas decorations.
That's awesome. I love it.
I stuck a Santa hat on my jack-o'-lantern I have on my end table. I put that on there and just let it stay out.
That's amazing. I'm excited. And I mean, with Operation Paperclip, they definitely refurbished a lot of different things.
Repurposed a lot.
Repurposed.
Yeah.
It's been a long day.
Repurposed.
Refurbished. I mean, they could have. No, I'm just going to let it go. Anyway, I'm ready to unseal this file. I can't keep words straight, so we got to unseal this file and do it. So without any further ado, Operation Paperclip is being unsealed. So, this actually happens during the Cold War. The Operation Paperclip takes place on July 19th, 1945, was the official start of what was called Operation Overcast, which was later named Paperclip, which we will get into. So a lot of things happened in 1945, not only for us here in the U.S., of course, like we had Roswell that was, getting ready to happen. And, there were all kinds of things being seen. But globally, 1945 was a huge year. The USS Indianapolis was sunk by a Japanese submarine that same year. V-Day for Germany's surrenders on May 7th happened. Nuclear bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Do I get props for saying that right this time?
You got it.
I did it.
Yeah.
So German concentration camps were also liberated. And one of the biggest things that happened in 1945 was the Yalta Agreement, which brought the US, British, and Soviet Union in allies, which they basically agreed how to end World War II and negotiated about how they would end World War II and kind of divide up Germany after this. So President Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, and Joseph Stalin all met for the Yalta Conference in 1945. They were nicknamed the Big Three because they had like the biggest countries and forces.
Yeah, they're the big mega powers.
The big boys. If they're getting involved, you're in trouble. So, and this was to discuss what the post-war fate of the world and Germany was going to look like, and also what were going to be the terms that the war was going to end on. Because we're politics. It's politicians. They have to negotiate on even how a war is going to end.
Right.
Like, just stop. Which has always baffled me. On a side note, like, why can't you just stop?
Well, if there's a war, there's obviously something to be fighting over. So, there's already a goal that you're trying to achieve. So you want to at least try to get as close as possible to that goal. Because you've already, at this point, if you're in the middle of a war, you've already lost, lives and resources. So you got to try to at least, have something to come back from. You got to have your little like participation award.
Yeah, and war is expensive too. War's expensive. Yeah, it's cost Elon Musk a lot of money. But this was actually their second meeting. This wasn't their first time, all three of them coming together. Their first meeting was actually the Tehran conference, which took place a year prior. Okay. And this was to bring the U.S. and British forces together against Nazi Germany. And this would also bring the Soviets into war against Japan, which would take place after Germany's unconditional surrender. So, yeah, there was no way Germany was not going to surrender after this. You've got three of the biggest forces going on. Like the Nazi Party was depleting at that point. It was going to happen. It was unconditional.
Right.
So after their surrender, there would actually be 4 post-war zones created in Germany. So the first one went to the U.S. The second one went to the British. The third one went to France. And the last one went to the Soviet military forces. And I looked a little bit on why France got involved, and it was because the zone that they got was the land that Nazi Germany had invaded. So they got that back. So Germany would be demilitarized, and a new term that came about, denazified, after World War II. They have their own special word.
Yeah. Denazification.
Denazification. Sounds like a disease.
Well, it kind of is.
Yeah. So Germany would actually take on a lot of the post-war ramifications while still not taking on all. They took on a lot. Like, I mean, they raised that country's taxes. They left military forces that were not German there. They demilitarized Germany. And I mean, we're not going to get into personal opinions further, but I mean, when something that drastic happens where, an entire like genocide comes out of some person's leadership, like you have to just scrap it all and just
Yeah.
like start back over.
Yeah, it's very hard to side with any decision once they've done something that heinous. It's
Yeah.
kind of hard to uphold any
I
other
always
policies.
think about the innocent people, like the little mom and pop farmer. But honestly, the little mom and pop farmer probably got like the worst end of it, whether it was from the Nazis or the taxation or the war itself or,
Right.
any of it. So this is where we're going to start learning about how the Cold War actually started.
Okay.
So Stalin actually made a lot of promises, which one of them was, he made a lot of promises on top of actually being one of the 3 founding members of the United Nations, which, of course, the big 3, they were the ones who started the United Nations. President Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, and Joseph Stalin. So one of the things that he would promise would to allow representatives from Polish politics into the communist-dominated government that now took over that section of Poland. As in part of the Soviets divide and part of the Soviets zoning was they got part of Poland. And their defense on how they got Poland was because that for the past 3 decades, Germany had used that sort of strip of land that was Poland to invade their country. So they're like, we're taking it over because they can't use it responsibly. That was how he looked at it, to put it in really, really layman's terms. So, and he also did get part of Berlin as well. I don't remember. I don't know. You can look up the Berlin Wall and stuff on your own time. I didn't put it in my notes this time. So Stalin also sanctioned free elections, especially that in all territories that were liberated from the Nazis. And for all of this, for all of the beautiful things that Stalin was going to do for Poland, the US and Britain would play nice with their now neighboring Soviets that bordered a lot of their countries and a lot of their territories. So we all agreed to play nice in the sandbox, and then someone's going to go and shit in the litter. So during the Yalta conference, this was actually when President Roosevelt was at one of his illest. He was very, very seriously ill during the time of the conference, and he would actually go on to pass away only 2 months after the conference, which then kind of thrusted President Truman to succeed him and to deal with the United Nations and all of these dealings with Winston Churchill and the Soviet Union and Joseph Stalin. And right from the get-go, it's noted that Truman did have suspicions about Stalin's intentions and about what Stalin was actually doing with the land and with the resources, because he was reaching a very powerful point just during these couple of years between 1944 and 1946. The Potsdam Conference in Germany would actually bring the big 3 back together for a final time, and they were now to discuss the final terms of ending World War II. And this was when Stalin had a lot of power and a lot of reach, and he was getting really, really nasty. He did absolutely nothing that he had promised Poland. He even went back on his obligations to the newly formed United Nations. And he even reneged his terms from the Yalta Conference. So he even went back on his original terms to, end World War II, or to, demilitarize Germany and to section up that land. He even went back on those original promises. And as a direct result, in 1946, Winston Churchill would give his infamous speech, The Iron Curtain, and the U.S. then entered the Cold War with Soviet Russia. So he fucked up. That's why you don't break promises.
You don't break promises.
No, and that's a lot.
Oh, yeah. I think this is really interesting, just getting kind of the backstory on the Cold War. because up to this point, we've talked a lot about the Cold War.
Oh my gosh, yes.
We've discussed this a lot from File 001. The Men in Black stuff had a lot of Cold War references. This is really cool to finally get to see kind of the beginning of this whole thing, because it's played a pretty big part in Cult Talk Conspiracy up to now.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. It plays a lot on, this whole story plays a lot on why I feel like we have so much distrust in our government today.
Yeah.
With respect to the Cold War and Operation Paperclip. But we'll get into why Operation Paperclip plays such a huge role in that aspect here in a little bit. So now the US and British organizations would team up to gain and employ German military scientists, technological advances, and even chemical weapons. So you got to remember, at this time, we had just gotten rid of the Nazi regime, the Third Reich. Nazi Party's gone. Regardless of that fact, there still remained some of the top scientists, top engineers, top aviation specialists that were a part of the Nazi Party and were some of the greatest minds. You can say what you want about them. Like, I mean, if you're smart, you're smart. It doesn't matter if you're a dick or not. You're smart.
Right.
Like, so now it became a race of who is going to get these scientists and these minds first. And where are they going to go? What are they going to do? Because, I mean, these were the same people who were, doing human experimentation and were, came up with like the gas chambers, which, oh my God. It's awful things came out of that. But also we're going to talk about some of the, you can tell I don't want to say good things.
I mean, yeah, you're not meaning like good things. Like, oh, these guys were really, they had good intentions. I mean, it was just like you said, there's a lot of smart people. Adolf Hitler, for all his faults, one thing he did was he made sure to surround himself with very intelligent people.
Yes.
Might not be morally intelligent, but they were definitely just smart people and very scientific, because that was one of the leading parts of the Nazi regime, was this scientific advancement they tried to achieve. So there was no bones about it. There were some very smart people involved for, all the bad. There was very smart people involved with the Nazi regime.
Oh, absolutely.
That Hitler employed.
Oh, yes. So the goal of this was to pretty much get the technological advances and get the scientists before Soviet Russia did. Because we were actually, the US and the Brits, we were a lot more in it to play nice than the Soviet Russians were. But there did come the Joint Intelligence Operatives, the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, which was actually a subcommittee of the Joint Intelligence Committee. And the Joint Intelligence Committee, their number one goal was to watch the Soviet Union. They actually had they were actually figuring out everything that they were doing. And by the end of it, they had 16 documents of extensive reports on the current affairs and the possible future of the Soviet Union by the time they were done. Now, the sub-agency, Joint Intelligence Operatives Agency, JIOA, as we will call them now, they were in charge of supervising Operation Paperclip. Their policies, creating the dossiers, extended files on Nazis, Nazi scientists, and other foreign scientists for that matter as well. So you've got the head honchos watching the Soviet Union, and then you've got kind of the underdogs watching sort of the players that are being fought over at this point. It almost kind of reminds me of an NBA draft. Oh, I'm going to get in trouble for that one.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say you're necessarily wrong. I mean, it's kind of what it was. It was kind of like taking the best of the best and trying to find the best. Yeah,
it really is. They're trying to get the best resources they can, and you have to remember, like, nobody wanted to use. In my brain and my intentions, nobody wanted to use that knowledge and that expertise in the way that Adolf Hitler did. Right. In my mind, that's how it goes. But
Guess that depends on how you're thinking.
yeah, I tend to be like, everybody's good. Like,
yeah.
So later on, the CIOS would later take over, and that was really a model off of the CIA, the Criminal Investigation Unit. But this was more on like a global scale rather than just home base. So it was actually an American and British task force whose goal was it to investigate all things related to the German science. So German science and technology. And they actually would get help from another subgroup who they would sometimes also compete against, called the ALSOS mission. Not too much on that. However, the ALSOS mission and the CIOS did discover the Olsenberg list. And this was kind of a turning factor because this actually contained classified letters from Bonn University that would come. Sorry, my notes got all fuckered there. I'm sorry. So the Olsenberg list actually came about when a physicist from Bonn University started sending letters to the CIOS and eventually got what seemed like the Olsenberg list. And this contained classified information, names, addresses, family, top secret stuff, social security numbers if you had at that time, like anything were in these documents. And these were people that were a part of the Third Reich, were not only a part of the Third Reich, but were also some of the top scientists in the Third Reich. And the Third Reich, if you don't know, it's another name for the Nazi regime, like head honcho people in the Nazi regime.
Damn.
So, and at this time, while all of this is going on, while all of this is being discovered, the JIC is watching, the JIOC is watching, or the JIOA is watching. It was described that Stalin and Soviet Russia were a very hostile entity with a center focus on world domination. And every time I think of that, I just go, for $1 million. And there were entire physics institutions that would be disassembled in Germany and then reassembled in Moscow. And they would take their accessories with them because some scientists went missing along with the institutions. So
wow,
they were taking their toys and accessories. So because of all this, it was necessary to move forward with Operation Overcast and Operation Paperclip. Well, AKA Operation Paperclip. They're one thing, not two separate things. So it was actually renamed Paperclip in 1945. And it was renamed that because what would happen was, President Truman was very adamantly against the recruitment of any sort of Nazi scientist or any person that was involved with the Nazi regime or took any sort of participation in it, and immediately denied them U.S. entry. Nope, you're a war criminal, you ain't coming in. So what ended up happening would be that it's suspected that the JIC or the JIOA, whichever one, would go in and alter these files to make them, basically eligible for U.S. entry. And what they would do...
There was a process.
There is a process. And what they would do is they would position a paperclip on their original file. And if that paperclip was there, it pretty much meant that, hey, their file needs to be altered to where they can come into this country. So it was then named Operation Paperclip because of the placement of that said paperclip in the actual file. Right?
So that's where we get the name.
That's where we get the name. That's actually such a cool little factoid though. Like I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Interesting. I always wondered where it got its name, so now we know.
I know. So now we're going to talk about a few gentlemen that made it over.
Okay.
So first we're going to talk about, oh, Lord help me, Hubertus Stronghold. Stronghold is what we're going to call him.
You're going to have a lot of names though.
I only picked three.
Okay.
However, when we do some undisclosed off this one, I'm going to have some troubles. So there's actually an award named the Hubertus See, my uncle's name is Uncle Hubert, so I keep wanting to call him Hubertus. So, but I bet it's Hubbert's. Hubertus.
I would say probably Hubertus.
Hubertus.
Might be Hubertus. I don't know.
I don't know. It sounds like a bone. Hubertus. Stronghold. So the Hubertus Stronghold Award is given out by the Space Medicine Association. And this award is actually given to the top scientist or clinician for outstanding work in aviation medicine. Lovely. So Stronghold is actually nicknamed the father of space medicine. And the reason he is nicknamed that is actually because he was the mind and the designer behind NASA's onboard life support. So he figured out a way to make humans be able to breathe and sustain life under the enormous pressure that space gives us, and to also be able to convert oxygen into carbon dioxide when there is no oxygen up there. So he really looked internally at the body and figured that out.
See, this is one of the interesting things with Paperclip. And you're getting started on here is the fact you're looking at all these men who have like accomplished great feats in scientific advancement, and you gotta remember in the back of your head like they're former Nazis.
Oh yeah,
that's the super cool thing about. I mean, that's the super cool thing. The super interesting thing about Paperclip
is
you have this kind of inner conflict with all this stuff. So you're like, wow, what a I think Werner von Braun is a very interesting one when we get to that. Like,
oh yeah, I got him.
Oh, of course.
So Stronghold was a former scientist with the Third Reich. While we gained so much knowledge from what Stronghold had to offer us, he unfortunately gained much of his knowledge from performing human experiments on prisoners of the concentration camps. He would either place them in low pressure chambers where they would die, or he would do hypothermic experiments on them where they would die, or he would do a combination of low pressure chambers mixed with the hypothermia experiment. So they'd have a combination of pressure and cold, and they would freeze to death.
That's the thing too about some of the scientific stuff that these Nazi scientists, were able to accomplish, is also kind of a product of their environment where they were just these fucking sadistic psychopaths who were like murdering people in the name of science. Whereas, other countries would have these bylaws and, restrictions put on what they could do. Nazi Germany was like, we want this done. Do whatever you got to do to get it done. Here, if you want to kill, dozens of soldiers in the process, do it, but get it done. And that was what kind of pushed the advancement they had, was they just had no chains, no restrictions. They were just doing this sadistic shit and just using bodies as just expendable components.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's really crazy to think about, and we kind of touched on it a little bit on The Real Men in Black of, how scary would it be if it's just a human being?
Right.
And like it kind of takes me into this part of our history where it's like, well, fuck, if it's a human being, I'd rather have a xenomorph. Like, I mean, you don't see them fucking each other over for a pension, like,
right,
or a percentage. I'm sorry. So you already brought him up, so we're going to talk about him.
The Aliens reference.
That is an Aliens reference.
Yeah, if you didn't catch it, guys.
So we're going to go ahead and talk about Werner von Braun. And he was also rumored to be a part of the Nazi regime. But what did Werner von Braun do? So he was an aeronautics engineer. He was actually the mind behind the V-2 rocket for Germany. He also became the director of NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center, and he was the chief architect behind the Saturn V launch vehicle, which was actually the vehicle that launched, I think, 12 people into space for the first time for the U.S. I believe that was the Apollo mission.
Yeah.
Dad, text me and let me know if I got that right. Yeah, so he has done all that. Very celebrated mind. And by the way, if you have ever seen, what are they? Are they called V2s? What are they called? Anyway, yeah, the V2, the launch. They're like these big cylinder things on the backs of on the bottoms, I guess, of the rocket or the space thing. They're huge. They're
Oh, yeah.
absolutely huge. Because we went to what's it called? I want to say Huntington, Alabama. It's the NASA there in Alabama.
Okay.
And they have old ones and like old space equipment and everything and like replicas and whatnot. I mean, they're ginormous. Like, oh my gosh. Like it's crazy just how big things are. Imagine if I go to the pyramids, I'm going to be like, oh my God. Not only was von Braun suspected of being a part of the Nazi regime, he was also suspected to be a member of the SS as well. And the SS, they were like the top tier guys. Like that's like Hitler's back pocket right there is how it was described to me. What he did was he ran an underground slave labor, which was actually to facilitate the V2 rockets, and they were built underground underneath the. I know, right? You're getting like mad scientist vibes.
Yeah, for real. That's how a lot of these guys are.
And
Psychopaths.
so he was actually said to go into these concentration camps because he was very picky about who his laborers were. They needed to be healthy. They had to be like, it had to be a certain way. Like they had to be able to sustain underground and they had to be able to last. So he would go and to these concentration camps and he would hand pick the laborers that would be taken back with him and to be worked as slaves in the underground rocket factory. Von Braun was one of the scientists, and this is when we're going to start getting a little bit back into Paperclip here. So he was one of the scientists that was brought to Fort Bliss, Texas, and White Sands Proving Ground, New Mexico. And they were labeled as War Department Specialist employees. And their jobs were to assist the U.S. Army with rocket experimentation. Makes sense. And then von Braun would go on to chief architect the Saturn V, which then propelled our astronauts over into the moon.
Right.
So what happened to these men? Actually, we're going to talk about one more before we go on. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Short little segment on him. So you may have heard of this one. Arthur Rudolph.
Sounds familiar. It does sound vaguely familiar.
Yeah. So in 1984, he was actually stripped away of his U.S. citizenship for his involvement with the U.S. With the Nazi regime.
So he was granted access to the United States and had it revoked.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So he came over. He had his citizenship for 21 years. So I want to say,
wow,
53. What would have been when he has it? Oh, hang on. Oh, 63. I was almost good at math. So yeah, he came into the country. He was recruited here in 1963. And then there's a big to-do on whether it was actually the Canada that came through and got rid of him because he was already kind of fleeing from the Nuremberg trials. So he went to go see his daughter in Canada, and his daughter called the popo on him because she's like, I am not dealing with this. Like, I love you, Daddy, but you's a Nazi.
Well, good on her.
I mean, yeah. So after going through trial,
the Nuremberg trials, I mean, just for anyone that doesn't know, that's the trials that the Allies held against German Nazis. Mm-hmm. That was kind of the judicial side of the end of the war. Is when all these Nazi representatives were basically tried for their crimes during the war. So, just a little side note.
Heated courtroom in there. Woo!
Yeah, I think it lasted for almost a year.
Yeah, it was. Oh, yeah. It was a big deal because, like, I did do some of the Nuremberg research going into this and whatnot, and like, I was mainly trying to find the list because you have the Nuremberg list, and then we had the German words. I'm hard, guys. I'm sorry. If y'all are from Germany, just know that your language is beautiful, but it's also really hard. But it was a big deal, and like the whole world was looking at it at that time. So Arthur Rudolph, he was actually employed and head of a factory that did use concentration camp prisoners as slave labor. And the Canadian jurisdiction, from what I read, and please in the comments correct me if I am wrong on this, and I do mean it, please. from what I read and understood, it was that the jurisdiction determined that while he was not directly responsible for there being slave labor, he condoned it by knowing that it was there. So he was guilty by association, was pretty much what the Canadian jurisdiction determined. And his citizenship was then revoked after 21 years. He was also he also worked on the V2. He was another mind behind that as well, another mind behind a lot of the space engineering that we have. And he would actually go on to die in his hometown of Nuremberg, Germany. And I mean, from what I read, it said that he lived a very peaceful life in Germany, that he went back pretty willingly, that it wasn't really much of a fight. So yeah, I mean, that really is like the only one that you hear of that got their citizenship taken away from the US.
Interesting.
Yes. And just to put it into perspective, the US brought about 88 German scientists over. So we have almost... Yeah, we have a lot. I read somewhere that it was 1,600 German scientists, but then I read, what is her name? Annie Jacobson. I knew her name was Annie, but I couldn't remember. So Annie Jacobson, she's an incredible writer. We talked about her a little bit with Roswell. She wrote an incredible book here. I did not get a chance to read this whole book in its entirety. However, I did read passages from it. Annie Jacobson, Operation Paperclip, the secret intelligence program that brought Nazi scientists to America. She quoted that there were 88 German scientists brought over, whereas I was reading different stuff saying that there was over 1,600 that were brought. It could have been families. It could have been, work
right.
people.
Yeah. I can see that. Like,
I'm not going unless Joey's going.
Right. I'm sure there was deals like that being made where, we were bringing over a scientist. He always wanted his wife and kids or whatever to be brought over. So I'm sure there was definitely stuff like that going on.
Because those families probably faced the same kind of punishment.
Definitely.
Even if not in a court of law, in the court of public opinion, they're pretty well fucked.
Basically, yeah, I would say.
So what happened to Stronghold? Stronghold would actually die on September 25th, 1988. He was actually never tried in Nuremberg. He never went through that. He actually very adamantly denies ever being involved with the Nazi Party. Very adamantly. This is the guy that supposedly did the low pressure experiments and did the hypothermia experiments. And we have a quote. And he goes on to say, "I have always forbidden even the thought of such experiments in my institute. Firstly, on a moral ground, and secondly, on the grounds of medical ethics." And none of his immediate family is actually still living anymore. It's all like nieces, nephews, grandkids, like shit like that.
Okay.
So I don't know, man. We don't know his life.
It's a slippery slope.
It is yes, yep. And I feel like that's how you just describe Operation Paperclip in a nutshell. It's the slippery slope.
Yeah.
So von Brunn would actually die of pancreatic cancer at 65 in 1977. And I found it quite entertaining because when I looked up how did Warren von Brunn die, the first thing that pops up on Google is he died prematurely of pancreatic cancer. And I'm like, well, Google, I think your bias is showing there. Like, because I don't know, man. I don't know. Pancreatic cancer is rough, but slave labor and human experimentation is rough too.
Right. I remember before I really even knew much about Werner von Braun, personally, I had heard, I watched this movie called October Sky.
Yeah.
And it's got Tobey Maguire in it. Or not Tobey Maguire. Jake Gyllenhaal. Those two mixed up all the time. I think everyone does. But Jake Gyllenhaal and Werner von Braun is talked about in that movie very highly. So that was my first exposure to Werner von Braun. It's just from that movie. They talk about him very, 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 very positively. And then hearing later that, oh, he was actually a former Nazi. It's like, okay, there's more to it. But I just remember like that hearing them talk about him in that movie, and like he's just like held up as this very, well-to-do guy, which he was a very brilliant scientist. But it's hard to forget the former Nazi part of it.
Yeah. It kind of like stains that little white napkin just a little bit. So how did Operation Paperclip end? It kind of did and it kind of didn't. So we have to remember the time period that we're talking about here. And we have to remember what we are talking about here. First of all, Operation Paperclip brought up huge moral questions about not only the US government, about the British government, and of course about the Soviet Union. So we had a lot of moral questions there. And a lot of those moral questions were answered with, well, if we didn't go and get them, something bad was going to happen to us. Or, the Soviets would have got them, or they would have been, like... Some people say, well, they would have been killed. You can have your own opinions about that one.
I don't think so. I don't think there's any way these guys would have not been utilized in some way to do what they do, because they showed this willingness under Adolf Hitler to do whatever they're told to accomplish their goal, and that's a very good characteristic to have. I mean, if you want someone to accomplish something, you tell them to do it by any means necessary, and they're willing to just take lives and, deform people and subject people to these like horrific forms of, torture, basically, just to achieve these scientific goals. I mean, you want to employ them before the wrong person. Obviously, they were already in the hands of Adolf Hitler. And you see how much trouble that caused. Yeah. You don't want to face that again. So you want to get them under your employ, ASAP, so you can start using them for you, I guess is the best way to put it. But it makes a lot of sense. And it is like a moral and ethics kind of thing. But it's always like, well, what if? What if someone else? What if the Soviets were to, get a hold of them? It would have been a whole other story. I mean, it's crazy.
Oh yeah, it would have altered obviously our history, but I think it very well would have jeopardized our space program that we have now and our aviation advancements. I really think it would have altered that drastically. Another issue that came up was Roosevelt was criticized very early on. And remember, Roosevelt wasn't around when Paperclip happened. He was actually criticized for the formation of the United Nations and also for even like trying to negotiate with Stalin. Because at that point, it was like, these guys they're not, like, they were communist. I mean, And I don't say that like they were communists. Like, I mean, they just were not in line with what Americans believed at the time. So it created a really big issue. And there's also like the question of dirty tactics. Like, we use the word smuggled goes around a lot. And that's kind of what I meant there at the beginning of we were a lot nicer than what the Russians were. Like, we didn't go in and kidnap you. We basically gave you a choice. Like, you're either going to come with us or we're going to give you over to them.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, at least they got a place to live. Well, I mean, I guess they got a place to live in Russia, but like, we were... I don't know if we were planning to kill it or threatening to kill him. I don't know what happened back then. I don't know.
I mean, I'm sure there was, obviously, that was probably part of the bargaining is, hey, either you like work for us or we're going to, try you for the murder of millions.
Oh, yeah.
And you're most definitely going to face the death sentence. I mean, I'm sure that definitely came into play.
Oh, absolutely.
For anyone that was stubborn enough to say, no, I'm not helping you. I'm sure there was obviously a much worse worse fate if they didn't agree. So
yeah. And then the question of espionage, spying came into a big question, like, because we even still question that to this day. A lot of people, I don't like that phrasing. I think a lot of viewpoints come from like government espionage and spying and dirty tactics and whatnot.
Yeah,
I think a lot of like what we talked about here recently with like Men in Black and then Operation Paperclip is Operation Paperclip especially because that puts a lot of morals into question. And if you're gonna play the morals game, yeah, it was a shitty thing to do, but we're here. I don't know. So it gave a lot of criticism to the U.S. and the people in power in the U.S. So when I was doing my research on this, I kind of started talking to the guys a little bit, and I'm like, you know, I'm kind of, I'm thinking of like how this really ended, and like why hasn't something as big as Operation Paperclip happened, like since then? Like why isn't it like why wouldn't we have heard something like that?
Right.
And it's because a lot of it may have just evened the playing field. You know, like the Soviets got their really high tech scientific people. The US got our scientists and, you know, NASA, space development and all that. And the British got theirs. So it really evened the playing field out for a lot of us. That, and there has still not been a group as vicious or as demented as the Nazis were.
No, there really hasn't. No. I mean, you can think of like you know, Al Qaeda and stuff like that, but those aren't even like, you know, anywhere near as advanced as, you know, the Nazis. I mean, they're just, you know, terrorists, you know, who employ these very primitive methods, but there's nothing as, you know, high tech and as advanced as the Nazi regime that we've had to face since then.
Oh yeah. And of course, like the conspiracy a lot behind Operation Paperclip is how much is our government willing to compromise? And how long are they going to lie about their compromises? And how will it affect us and our advances? And what are we willing to sacrifice in the name of science is really the biggest question behind Operation Paperclip.
True. Yeah.
That's all I got for you. I'm going to leave you on that heavy note.
Yeah. It's very good questions. Like I said, there's a lot of like moral and ethical questions that surround Operation Paperclip. You just kind of got to take into account the time period this all happened. You know, it's like, what if you're not going to utilize, you know, if you're not going to do something with these guys, what else is going to happen with them? You know, obviously they're making these huge leaps in scientific advancement. Either you can squander that by, you know, just killing them, and then where do you start? You start from zero, and you got to try to make up all this stuff that they were able to do, or you kind of, you know, lesser of two evils, or, you know, maybe two wrongs make a right, and you team up with them and you try to advance. I mean, that's really the only thing you can do. You can't just squander it.
Yeah.
For all the evil, I mean, they're very brilliant guys, on an intelligence standpoint, you know, not on a, you know, social or, you know, moral standpoint, but as far as intelligence, they're brilliant men.
Oh yeah, and I mean, one of them was, you know, head of the Marshall Space Center. The other one has an entire scientific medical award given out to them. And I mean, just to go on and on and on. And I mean, we can definitely do undisclosed, but I mean, those are some of like the bigger names that came out of Operation Paperclip. Some of the more, I don't know if controversial is the right word.
I'd say more high profile. They're definitely more high profile.
Yeah.
I'd say there's definitely controversy in it, but you know, I think over the years, their scientific achievements have kind of overshadowed their past.
Oh yeah. But I mean, there's still, I was reading articles from like 2020 that came out about Stronghold, about his involvement with the Nazi Party and about how side note about him, he actually had his name revoked from the Scientific Hall of Fame in 2006 because of his alleged Nazi involvement. Which I found that, and I was like, oh my gosh. So there's still ramifications happening to this day, and rightfully so. But it's crazy for me to think like how that has happened almost 100 years ago, and it's still affecting things that
is wild.
Mm-hmm. That is Operation Paperclip. That is the meat and bones of it.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, Operation, it's crazy to think, and definitely, like you said, it does call a lot into question when it comes to like moral and ethics. But all in all, you got to just take into account the world that, the way the world was. I mean, it's very similar. Cold War era isn't too far off from what we're currently in now. I mean, the world is kind of in a similar state with all this distrust and disinformation going around. I mean, there's just certain things that you have to do to survive. And sometimes it means teaming up with former Nazis, I guess, because they're brilliant guys. I mean, there's nothing else you can say about them. They're brilliant people.
I mean, it's kind of like I said earlier, like, you can be a dick all you want, but if you're smart, you're smart. People are going to work with you. Like,
yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's, it is what it is. I mean, they're obviously have horrific pasts and did horrific things, but, for better or worse, we were able to utilize their brilliance to help advance the world. I mean, the entire
absolutely.
world.
Absolutely. We were able to go to the moon with that. And then, after that, it launched, I think Russia was the next country to go to the moon directly after us. I think they just missed us.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was a space race between the US and Soviets.
Yeah.
That's what it was all about. It was about getting to the moon. I mean, I don't think no matter how scientifically talented these guys were, it'll never, I guess, make up for what they did during World War, during their time in the Nazi regime. It'll never make up for that stuff. But luckily, we were able to utilize them for our benefit and I guess the world's benefit and use their strengths.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like we kind of took like the guck at the bottom of the pot and made like a really good chili out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, putting it in like the layman's terms possible.
Yeah, I mean, it is like as interesting as Paperclip is. It is like one of those things where it's like kind of uncomfortable to talk about because it is like it is like hard to like balance this like moral and ethical like conflict where you're like, man, like this guy is so brilliant and he's so smart and talented. Then you're like, but he is a former Nazi, so it's kind of hard to like say this kind of stuff, but it's stuff you can't ignore. You can't ignore the what these guys have done for the world. Once they were able to be kind of, I guess, put under the right harness, because obviously during the Nazi regime they were just monsters.
Oh yeah, and I mean, it is hard to talk about because we have gone into depth about like how awful the things that happened during the Holocaust and the Nazi regime, was and is and all that. But I mean, the fact still remains: if Werner von Braun had not come over, we probably would not have NASA as it is today.
Right.
We would probably still have a form of it, but I don't think we would be as technologically advanced. And it's a fact of the matter, unfortunately.
And it's just crazy to think, like, these guys who we did employ, Werner von Braun, just, for example, you take Werner von Braun, if he would have gotten employed by the Soviets, it would have just completely changed the world. I mean, these are men that really did shape the world, and things could be totally different if just things would turn out just a little bit different. If they would have got picked up by some other country, it would have just changed the whole trajectory of history. I mean, it's wild to think that these guys were that powerful and that brilliant, that they really did shape the world.
Oh yeah. And I mean, it's scary to think, what if, all of these minds that we ended up accruing, what if they did go over to Joseph Stalin, who at the time was described as being cellular focused on world domination, and, creating, like, taking over the world and the globe and making it all one Soviet Union. It's very scary to think about what could have happened if it had gone another way.
Yeah, it's wild. But yeah, Operation Paperclip, like you said, it's a total moral and ethics mindfuck, but it's just one of those things. It happened, and luckily, for all it's worth, we were able to harness these guys before someone else did, because it's Absolutely. Just it's insane to try to even begin to think about that. But I think you did a good job covering Operation Paperclip, though. I mean, this was really good.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. I love to do a little history lesson in with my conspiracies. And
Yeah, we got like a really good like origins of the Cold War, which we have mentioned so much
I know.
here in Cult of Conspiracy, and it's really good to kind of start back at the beginning and get an understanding of what this actually was. You know, what the Cold War actually, what started it. So, yeah, this was great. I think a great companion piece to the stuff we covered in Men in Black. A really great
Oh,
companion
yes.
piece to File 001 Roswell. I
Yes.
mean, excellent. There's definitely like a little mini series somewhere in Cult Talk Conspiracy of just Cold War era stuff because there's so much that stems from it. There's so much. Just it's a wild time in world history. At the time, you had the Cold War heating up. You had all the UFO phenomena that just like sparked up with it. I mean, it's nuts.
1945 was definitely that generation's 2020.
Oh yeah, for sure, definitely.
They
Definitely.
went through it. They went through it. I would have taken UFO sightings over riots, damn it.
Probably. Oh, definitely. I would say, yeah.
That's what I would have
agree with
done.
that.
But it's really interesting. And like, growing up, I never really understood the Cold War. And that's probably why a lot of my stories have leaned toward the Cold War era of our humanity. Because I never really understood it. It was always described to me as a war of words.
Yes.
And I never understood that. Because I'm like, you're a country. You've got a whole nation behind you. Like, if you want to fight, you're going to fight. And then I learned about taxes.
Yeah, it's wild. And also, it's crazy to think too, like how long the Cold War went. I mean, it's nuts. Like that's one thing I always had trouble like understanding is how fucking long the Cold War was going on. It's insane at the time period that the Cold War is kind of summed up in.
I looked it up earlier. Oh my God. That's not what I was expecting. It's 45 years.
Yeah, it's a long fucking time. It goes well into the 80s.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, until the Berlin Wall comes down, right? It's like
really?
what ended them, whatnot, and then the Cuban Missile Pact, I think, was part of that, ending it. So yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. Gorbachev and was it Gorbachev and Reagan? Yeah, Gorbachev and Reagan. All kinds of shit that goes into it, but it's a pretty dense time period.
That's really interesting. A little tidbit here. My dad, when we went to NASA in Alabama, we would always get to go and have lunch with the astronauts and whatnot. And there was one astronaut, and I'm gonna have to ask him who it was, but during the time of the Cold War and the Berlin Wall coming down, they were actually up in space with a Russian team, and they actually got in like the space door where the two crafts would connect, and there's like this little tunnel. And they got in the tunnel, and the astronaut that we were speaking to, and another Russian astronaut reached through the door and shook hands, and that was their signification of the Cold War ending for them. So
wow,
that story always stuck out in my mind.
Yeah,
so
that's amazing. Gives me cold.
I hate that
chills.
I can't remember his name.
Yeah, you'd have to follow up on that for sure.
Yes. My dad's got photos. I'm working on getting the photos. So.
Oh yeah. But this was File 008. Operation Paperclip.
Yes.
Great little dive into the Cold War.
I thought it's been a really good month too. Like just talking about like the Men in Black. That was a really good one. I think this followed up Men in Black really, really well. And
for sure.
Some of the real Men in Black really did influence the way that I was going to tell this conspiracy.
Excellent.
Hit on some of those points. So it was fabulous. I love it.
And
so
now,
we have an announcement.
Yeah, you're not going to have to wait 2 weeks for the next episode because you're getting a little special Christmas bonus next week. On the 20th, you will be getting a special encounters episode, and we're going to be covering real life Santa Claus encounters.
Yes,
it's wild. We kind of touched on maybe doing it, and then I looked into it. I was like, just typed it into Google, and there really is like this whole like little subculture. I mean, not subculture. I guess just this community that has these vivid memories of seeing Santa Claus like when they were younger, and it's super interesting. It's wild. And we definitely took a little dive into it. We're going to be exploring it into Santa Claus encounters as part of a very cult talk net Christmas too. We'll be joining to get that little special episode. So really excited for that. It's going to be a wild one.
I'm excited. I love Christmas. I truly do. I can't wait to talk about the big man, and I'm probably going to have some cookies while we do that one. That's going to be fun.
Well, I've got 2 encounters I've found that I'm covering. I'm covering 2 because I just found these 2 very interesting ones. I couldn't decide which one's better to do, so I was like, I'm just doing them both.
Why not?
Because, they're both really good. So, but yeah, that's going to be your next episode of Cult Talk Conspiracy next week. So you don't have to wait long for the next episode. Then we'll be right back with a regular episode. You're getting a healthy dose of Cult Talk Conspiracy here these last couple months with these specials we're dropping. So we really hope you guys are enjoying them. Yeah, I hope you guys are enjoying them. Encounters is definitely fun. It's a fun concept we camp with. So I really enjoy doing these. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I think that's it, Bailey. I mean, you have anything else to add, or?
I think you got it. I think we're good. I'm excited. I really can't wait for the encounters episode. I think those are going to be fun.
Oh yeah, I can't wait for everyone to join us for that. Now, make sure you guys reach out to us on all of our social media accounts at Cult Talk Net across the board. That's Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and leave us comments and let us know what you guys think of the episode. Let us know if you want to add anything or something we missed, any other interesting tidbits you have.
Oh my gosh.
Just leave in the comments.
Speaking of comments, I did want to point out someone left a lovely little comment a couple days ago. We're in October, or no, we're in November. I'm sorry. Time is obsolete. We don't know what it is, but left a lovely little comment about how our podcast made their night at work. And as a former night shifter, that touched my heart. So I am so happy. And
they left a comment on YouTube on the Men in Black episode. Yeah, the Men in Black episode. Yeah, and we'll really appreciate it. Love stuff like that.
Yes. We
love when you guys reach out to us. Yeah, we've had a lot of good feedback on Cult Talk Conspiracy, and I really like it. It's really cool to see people reach out and enjoying what we're doing, and definitely we're growing and we're trying to change things, make things better, and just make this kind of like the best podcast we possibly can. So feedback like that's helpful, and we'll even take the critiques because you can't improve something unless someone says it needs improved. So by all means, reach out if you have anything you want to critique. Let us know. I'm very good about constructive criticism. Bailey is too. So you won't offend us if you have an issue with the podcast, because we want to make this the best conspiracy podcast we possibly can. So by all means, reach out to us.
Yes.
But until then, I think that pretty much does it. Like I said, make sure you follow us at Cult Talk Net across everything. We got a couple Cult of Campbells coming out this month. I mean, at least one that come out this month. We have Cult of Lore coming out. We have a whole week of Christmas content coming next week. A very Cult Talk Net Christmas 2. Super excited about that. I love that week, and we get to do Cult of Campbell. We get to do Cult Talk Conspiracy, and we have a bunch of bonus content leading up to a very special Christmas episode. So thank you guys for joining us. I think that does it, Bailey.
I think so too.
All right.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you for listening. I've been Ty.
I've been Bailey.
Question everything.